What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. These days, if you ask most Russians about their single greatest worry, the answer is almost always the same: the ever-rising cost of living. People find themselves flipping through economic news they never used to bother with, studying the interest rates, inflation forecasts, and hanging on to any glimmer of hope that prices might finally normalize. Just like citizens of any other normal country would do. Because honestly, the regime of Putin did everything possible to distance its people not from the politics only, but from the economics as well. People in Russia want to have nothing in common with policymakers, financial wizards, and other authorities. They want to keep living their lives as peaceful as possible, with minimal intervention from the government. That's why when their paths do cross, it is always a very anxious and stressful moment. So no wonder, when things get really bad, because people are simply not following along with the statecraft, the situation is already very dire and beyond saving. This panic only exaggerates the complexity of the situation and escalates the problems, such as the inflation in our case, even further. Official statements from Росстат put inflation at 9.5% in 2024, which already doubles the central bank's rather optimistic target of 4%. But there is a twist. Polls show people feel it closer to 15%, the very same people who prefer to not do anything with such a complicated thing. So in reality, the inflation is most likely much higher, since the interest rates alone already surpass 20%. And when your wallet keeps shrinking, those official figures start looking like a cruel joke. The question echoing through Russian kitchens, bus stops and office hallways is whether this extraordinary inflation can be stopped, or if the new normal is just an endless cycle of price hikes. Because let's be real, the Central Bank of Russia tried to take the situation under control. Its head, Elvira Nabiullina, countless times hinted that the invasion is the root cause of all this, and that war spending must be significantly reduced or stopped completely. She warned Putin that this will happen, but he didn't listen. So as of recently, it looks like that no matter what decision the economists of Russia take, it simply doesn't help anymore. Which made me thinking, what if they just gave up completely? And all these activities that seems they are doing is just to put on a show, to divert the blame from themselves. Because if they are asked whether they are doing anything to stop inflation from rising, well, they can reply with full confidence: we are doing everything we can. The cruel reality is that inflation often works like a silent tax, one that strikes hardest on the poor. If the basics such as groceries, electricity and public transport consume most of your monthly paycheck, any price increase can be catastrophic. It's one thing if you earn around $3,000 per month and you can stash your extra cash in bank deposits or foreign currency, shielding yourself from the worst of it, the so-called rainy day fund, as some people call it. But if you're only making $300 per month, there is no room for creative maneuvering. You cannot invest in asset protection or shuffle your money into safer harbors. You just have to buy bread, milk, and maybe try to cover the rent, that's it. And when those essentials cost more every week, you slip deeper into a financial trap that leaves you angry, bitter, and powerless. Person making 10 times the average salary will not even see these price increases. One week your grocery bill is $100, the next week is $110. And this extra $10 is the price he probably paid for parking while shopping around. But if you're a person where this $10 difference determines whether you can buy a couple bottles of juice this week or you will have to stick to tap water, well, that's where you feel the consequences of rapidly increasing inflation the most. Russia's wartime economy has made things even more complicated. A new inequality is taking place, where people supporting the conflict, whether by fighting on the front lines or working in industries tied to the war effort, they are receiving big pay raises. This influx of cash floods the consumer market with new demand, pushing prices further and leaving everyone else in the dust. Think of a factory worker, for example, who used to make $400 a month and suddenly now bringing home $2,000, thanks to defense-related work. Just by switching from screwing some bolts to the bus, now to screwing the same bolts to the drone, and now his pay increased 5 times. Of course, that extra money will be spent on better food, nicer clothes, and a few luxuries once out of reach. But in the same city, you still have bus drivers, teachers, paramedics, whose salaries barely budged. They all shop at the same markets, pay the same utility bills, and watch the same price tags get steeper. The new money in the system inflates costs for everyone, but only a few enjoy the benefits. Inflation and economics are just pure cold numbers. They have no feelings. They have no regrets. They do not care about a retiree not being able to afford a bottle of milk. The market is guided by an invisible hand, and it's only subject to one single law of supply and demand. If the demand is higher while the supply remains the same, or at least even goes down maybe a little bit, well, the price will increase to bring back the balance. Fewer people are able to buy things. And when fewer people are able to buy things, the price will drop to make them more affordable. It is that simple. The central bank regularly checks how people feel about the economy, tracking something called the Consumer Sentiment Index. Each month, they conduct polls asking folks if they think prices have declined, crawled up a bit, or stayed the same. And so recently, nearly 60% of respondents said that the increase feels huge. That's a big number, but it's not surprising. Meat, milk, vegetables, housing expenses. These are the items people notice the first because they are necessities. And meanwhile, the cost of eating out, resort vacations, or dry cleaning, for example, may be climbing, but many cannot afford those things in the first place, so it barely registers. I doubt a person who lives from paycheck to paycheck will notice the difference in price of a 2-week vacation in all-inclusive hotel in Turkey. That's why the increases of such non-essential expenditures were barely noticed. Only people who have a considerable amount of extra money can afford such trips. And they most likely have not even noticed that the 2-week stay price increased by an extra, let's say, $100. Another question is whether the central bank can even wrestle inflation down to 4% within 3 years. More than half of Russians surveyed said that, that's not going to happen. I wonder why. 20+% right now, down to 4% in 3 years. I guess you see the trend. This is not a momentary shift in opinion, it's growing skepticism that has stretched over many months. People have seen enough decisions and enough failed promises to suspect that central bankers do not hold the real levers of power. Not when the government is obsessed with financing this war at any cost. It all goes back to a simple dynamic. War demands money, and lots of it. Soldier salaries, defense contractors, and new industrial projects keep the cash flowing through state budgets and private loans. Even if the central bank tries to curb spending by hiking the interest rates, the defense sector can just ignore it. Simple as that. They know the state will always pay the bill for whatever they need, no matter how much it distorts the economy. When a drone factory needs to expand its facilities, it can afford huge loan costs because its revenue are fueled by war-driven contracts. That cycle undermines every attempt to control inflation in the traditional sense, which is no wonder. The central bank increases the rates to reduce the economic activity, hoping that loans will no longer be issued under such high rates. And then comes Putin's administration, says, however much it's going to cost, we don't care. Just make us 100,000 more drones. No questions asked, the bill is paid. So what was the point of a rate increase all along? The only ones who are hurting are regular people who can no longer afford mortgages, car payments, and credit card bills. Normally, central banks hike interest rates to push people and businesses away from frivolous borrowing. If loans get too expensive, the economy should theoretically cool off. Fewer people buy cars or houses, more money gets parked in savings accounts, and reduced spending eventually rebalances supply and demand, bringing prices down. Well, that's at least how it should work under normal circumstances. The problem is, in Russia right now, that textbook approach is hitting a wall. Yes, personal loans have become astronomical. It's practically unthinkable to pay 27% interest on a mortgage. Imagine this. 30% on a car loan or 50% on credit card. I'm not even kidding. Sberbank, one of the main banks in Russia, APR rate on their basic credit cards right now stands at 49.8%. What we have in North America around 20-25% now seems like nothing, right? So obviously, many ordinary Russians have backed away from borrowing because it's simply not worth the risk. But at the same time, there is a spike in business loans, especially from companies linked to defense or the ones getting state-subsidized interest rates. Sometimes these favorable loans come with absolutely no interest attached. While the economy is struggling and people become poorer with each day passing, here is yet another tank factory which received 10 billion rubles grant from the administration at 0% interest. That means the overall pool of money circulating in the economy keeps growing, because big businesses continue to borrow at rates that are either artificially lowered or effectively irrelevant. So no wonder the central bank representatives, or Elvira Nabiullina specifically, just said, well, screw it, I'm not going to try and solve Putin's problems anymore. Everything I do he just ignores and keeps flowing even more money into his pointless war pit. That's it, I give up and wash my hands. I'll do bare minimum just to avoid the suspicion, and whatever happens, happens. I am done. In the meantime, some die-hard Putin's fans and fully brainwashed people continue to close their eyes to these obvious problems, preferring to come up with any explanation and justification they can. Their main claim is that these central banks' policies have a delayed effect. They say maybe that magic interest rate that brings the inflation under control is not found just yet. And soon enough, as soon as this interest rate is found, everything will fall back to normal. That's a very optimistic story, if you ask me. But the more realistic view is that if raising interest rates has not slowed the inflation yet, there is no particular reason to think a tweak here and there will suddenly reverse the trend, especially when the defense budget and subsidized sectors create an insulated parallel economy that does not follow any basic economic principles. A useful analogy here is to compare inflation control to taking painkillers. If your head hurts, you take some pills, hoping to feel better. But if you keep doubling the dosage and the pain never stops, well, you might be misdiagnosing the problem entirely. Painkillers are not going to cure a serious underlying condition, and that's precisely what is happening with the central bank's rate hikes. Interest rates are these pills, and rising inflation is the headache. No matter how many times they raise the rates, the inflation is still there. The pill is not working. By now, there is already a creeping realization that inflation in Russia is not just about the money supply or consumer demand. It's tangled up with war spending, new waves of inequality, and a massive chunk of the budget going into salaries for soldiers and defense contractors. As the interest rates climb higher, people see no sign of relief in their daily expenses. So they do the logical thing: buy stuff now, before prices climb even further. Businesses too rush to invest or restock, fearing that the next interest rate bump or another supply freeze. Well, that behavior ironically accelerates the problem the central bank is trying to fix. What we end up with is a vicious cycle. Mistrust feeds inflation, and inflation feeds mistrust. There's also a self-fulfilling prophecy in place. Out of fear of an upcoming higher inflation, people do everything possible to bring that event much sooner. Yes, 20% increase is scary, they think, but what if next year things will get 30, 40, or even twice more expensive? Well, I obviously better buy right now. Well, there you go, guys. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to my channel. If you wish to support my work, there are links down below, for example, my Patreon for some bonus content. This is a great way to support the channel. Thanks so much for watching. See you on Tuesday.
We won't succumb to their tricks, the facade they try to sell, their twisted words and feeble claims on us all they